Evening class. This is my presentation. It's going to be on carbohydrates and obesity. As we all know, obesity has become one of the major challenges of health. It causes billions and billions of dollars to treat, and it causes a lot of disability to so many people. So today I will be looking at obesity and what actually it is and what causes it, the preventions, and all that we need to know about obesity. So stay tuned and listen. Obesity is a diet-related chronic disease. It needs to be treated with diet, exercise, medications to cure it. It has to take a long time treatment. It's a lifetime treatment when you have obesity. You can reduce your weight and you can prevent the signs and symptoms. The associated risks like cardiovascular diseases and diabetes, but you need to do it as a lifelong activity. You don't have to stop and go back to whatever causes the obesity. And so, as we know, every health challenge, there's always a lot of research going into it. There's always a lot of activities going into it, finding out what is going on, what needs to be done. And so obesity is not different. A lot has been done about obesity, a lot of research has been done, and most of the time they associate it to carbohydrates or the kind of food that we eat. But I'm going to look specifically to what type of carbohydrates really causes obesity. Is it every type of carbohydrates, or there are some specific type of carbohydrates that causes obesity? So this presentation is about what kind of carbohydrates really causes obesity. So firstly, I look at one research work, and this was done in 2007 by Wiley, Rosette and his colleagues. They look at energy dense carbohydrates and the development of obesity. So they did a lot of work into it, and in the end they said that it wasn't what we eat that causes obesity, or necessarily the carbohydrate that we eat that causes obesity. For example, if you eat whole grains, that will not necessarily lead to carbohydrates. That will not necessarily lead you to obesity. But if you eat the refined type of carbohydrates, like the refined sugars, that can cause or increase your risk of getting obese. So this particular research supports my topic, which I'm seeking to find evidence to support and make a point. It supports it in the sense that it concluded that it is not necessarily just eating carbohydrates that will lead to obesity, but the kind of carbohydrate that you are eating. That is the content of it, the quality of it, and not necessarily the quantity. Secondly, I look at another study, and this one was also done in 2003 by Foster and his colleagues. This is another peer-reviewed research work that was done, and they also look at whole grains, like I mentioned before. They look at fruits, they look at all kinds of foods that we eat, or most kinds of the foods that we eat, and like the major types, the proteins, the fats, and the carbohydrates. So they try to ask the question, does it really matter, uh, what kind of carbohydrates that we eat that really, is more or less just like the question that I'm also asking here. So, and they didn't also come out with a different conclusion. They also came out to say that it is not the quantity or the amount of carbohydrates that an individual is that leads to what? Obesity, but the quantity. I mean the quality of the carbohydrate, what it contains, that can lead to obesity. So they have come out that added sugars in drinks like fruit juice and other drinks that we drink, when there is added sugar in it, it has the tendency of about 0.08 units to cause what, or every to cause an increase. So every additional, I mean to cause every additional 12 pounds in a child. So you can imagine the drinks that our children are drinking nowadays, that is always sweetened. uh, these are the things that really causes obesity. The third one that I looked was done by Van Damme and his colleagues in 2007. They look at they also look at carbohydrates intake and energy intake, and they also look at different kinds of foods, and they look at what really increases the risk of one becoming obese. They came out with no different conclusion. They said that it was rather the quality of the carbohydrates that matters, but not the amount that you eat. And they also, mention beverages that are high in sugar or free sugars or refined sugars and dense energy carbohydrates. They are the really ones that causes what, or increases one's chance of getting obesity. I did a further research, and I found Yuseng, he did it in 2004, another research. Um, they also look at different kinds of foods, different kinds of carbohydrates, the amounts that people take, and this whole thing also supported the topic that I'm looking at. They look at different kinds of carbohydrates and different kinds of people over a certain amount of time. They came out with a conclusion that amount of carbohydrates that a person eats does not really reflect what his weight, but the quality of it, the kind, what kind is it, that really matters. It and they also concluded that the refined carbohydrates are the actual carbohydrates that we need to avoid if we want to what, decrease weight, or if you want to lose weight, or if you want to prevent what, obesity. All these findings that I mentioned or I spoke about were all correlated by another study that was done in 2015 by Santiago and his colleagues. They also look at many kinds of different foods, different carbohydrates, to find the association of carbohydrates and obesity. They have come out to say that between from the 70s coming down to the 2000s, people have become much obese. And when you look at the amount of food or the kind of food that we eat, there is also an increase in the percentage of what calories that we eat, especially in drinks and sodas and other things. So averagely, we add about 567 calories, these days than the previous decades, like 3 decades ahead behind. So there is a link between the two, in the sense that now we eat so much refined carbohydrates, and there's also a substantial amount of increase in weight, and that cuts across all ages, children, adults, the aged, women, men. Everybody is at risk, or everybody is becoming obese. So all these studies one after the other, and even recently, just like 2015, is still confirming the same thing, that it is not necessarily the amount of carbohydrates that an individual eats, but the quality of it, the kind of it, the refined sugars, the highly dense carbohydrates, like in French fries, the pieces, they are the actual ones that causes what, or that increases one's chance of getting what, obese. The last one that I did was also a study done by Grewald in 2014 in Britain. They look at, he also look at monosaccharides, disaccharides, and the free sugars and naturally occurring sugars, and try to look at, what actually causes obesity. So it is interesting to note that, you know they found out that shrubs, honey, and sweetened fruit juice, I mentioned fruit juice before, that can cause obesity, but it is actually the sweetened type, when those that are with added sugars, that causes what, obesity, or that increases one's chance of getting obesity. But those that are naturally occurring, like in honey, they do not have, much risk of association to what, obesity. But free sugars, added sugars, increases one's chance of obesity. So in conclusion, we can evidently say that from all these studies, the direction is to one point. It is not how much carbohydrates that you eat that can increase your risk of obesity, but the quality, the quantity of it, the kind of it. The refined, the highly dense carbohydrates, the added sugars, they are the ones that increases one's chance of getting what, obesity. So these are the possible questions that I asked in the previous model. I said I will provide the answers. The answers are in the last slide of this particular one. After the references, the next slide is where the answers are. So you just look through. This is the second part. The references, and these are the answers. I thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope the video is a nice one. I'm trying my best. It's difficult, but I tried my best to make it lovely. Thank you, and I will be looking up to see your questions or your contributions, and I'm hoping to also read yours or hear your presentations. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.